Whether it's Google Hangout, Zoom, BlueJeans, Slack, Skype, or Teams, and whether you might be auditioning as an actor, teaching a course, or making any kind of presentation, it's critically important to put your best face forward on the web. My name is James Mathers. I'm a cinematographer and founder of the nonprofit group Digital Cinema Society. Our mission is to help the entertainment industry keep current on motion picture technology. One of our main activities has been covering the latest innovations at industry trade shows. For many years, we put together a small team, including myself as the interviewer, a cinematographer, and a producer, to record short segments from the show floor. We would then run the media files on cards to an editor on location with us close by, who would quickly edit the pieces in order to have them streaming from our website, all within a few hours. Then came the coronavirus. With the cancellation of all the major trade shows, starting with NAB, we were forced to quickly pivot and start conducting and posting our interviews on the web from our homes. We learned quite a bit in the process, and the purpose of this presentation is to share some of those insights. I'll start with a little background on our process, as well as the gear and workflows that we used. Ours is probably a somewhat unique situation. After all, not everyone has access to the high-end cinema cameras and lighting gear that I happen to own from my day job as a DP, or the friendly relationships with manufacturers and service providers I'm lucky to have from my work with DCS. So I'll also cover how to look your best on camera, no matter the level of gear you may have access to. We decided to use the Zoom platform to conduct our interviews for the DCS 2020 Cinema Technology Spotlight Series. It's relatively easy for invited guests to get started, and they have good integration with most popular calendar programs to organize calls and send reminders, which can get pretty complicated accounting for various time zones. Charlene Mathers, Executive Director of DCS and producer of the series, reached out to our sponsors to schedule their interviews, much as she would have done in the regular lead-up to the NAB convention.
We wanted to release our videos during the time frame that the convention had been previously scheduled, in order to keep in sync with the manufacturer's normal product release cycles. Important announcements are usually timed in order to make a big splash at the show each year.
Although we scheduled and recorded calls using Zoom, we rarely used that sound or picture in the final interview. The platform did provide a good way for me to communicate and interact with our guests, but we wanted to elevate these interviews far beyond the typical video conference call and avoid the usual web compression and connection issues. So we asked our guests to record their side of the interview separately and get us all the elements to edit into a more polished presentation. But how could we quickly gather all these elements from guests who are literally located all over the globe? That's where Frame.io came to the rescue. Their global senior VP of innovation, Michael Cioni, helped us design a workflow to collaborate remotely and give each interview subject the ability to securely upload their own recordings and background content to the Frame.io server.
Jim explained the challenges of their situation, and I felt Frame.io might be the perfect solution, especially considering that we're in the middle of a pandemic lockdown. Frame.io's collaborative tools are designed for filmmaking professionals who are in a distributed environment, and that meant that the DCS team was able to take full advantage of working remotely themselves. However, what really proved valuable was the ability to simply send a link to interview subjects, which were vast and numerous, and they may have a lot of different variety of technical abilities, and yet they could still easily upload their self-shot content to Frame.io servers. At the time of the interview, many of these product announcements were still under embargo, so Frame.io's security features were also key to this assignment. But ultimately, Jim and Christopher and the entire DCS team adopted Frame.io instantly, and I'm proud to say how they leveraged it to make an extremely well-executed series.
Meanwhile, I recorded my side of the conversation on an AJA Key Pro Ultra Plus, which allowed for multiple video and audio tracks to be recorded simultaneously in HD. This included my image and sound recorded separately from the web conversation, one track as a higher quality master and another as a proxy. We also recorded the Zoom conversation in this way as an output from my laptop. This gave us the other side of the conversation in case the interviewee was not able to separately record theirs. Recording all 4 of these tracks to a single recorder really helped simplify the workflow, which was a godsend considering that I was a one-man crew as well as on-camera interviewer. The AJA Pack solid-state drives and the Thunderbolt dock are extremely fast, and I was able to quickly download everything to my OWC Thunder Bay RAID. I then uploaded my proxies to the Frame.io server, and that's where our editor, Christopher Scott Nell, took over.
Well, the first thing I did was I downloaded all of the proxies that Jim created off of Frame.io, and then I downloaded all the guest media and their footage from Frame.io. And once I did that, I created a multi-clip sequence in Adobe Premiere Pro. I edited everything, created all the graphics, added front and back end music, and then rendered out a preview of my edit for Jim to take a look at. And then once that was approved, I sent him the final Premiere Pro project file where Jim replaced all the proxies with full resolution media. And then after he did that, he rendered it and uploaded it to Vimeo.
Now let's talk about cameras. I used a Panasonic VEBCAM because I happen to own a couple and had them here with me during the lockdown. While I would always recommend using the best equipment you have access to, I will admit that this may be a little overkill. Nevertheless, there are lots of affordable options out there, and just about any camera you can find will be better quality than the web cameras built into most computers. Late model mobile devices can be a decent option, and they are already web friendly, so no additional adapters are necessary. I used an AGA U-tap to feed the HD SDI output of my VEBCAM into my laptop via a USB 3 connection. AGA also has HDMI to USB adapters to go into the computer. But one thing I learned in this process is that you cannot use the HDMI connectors that are common on many computers as an input channel. They're a one-way street and only support an outbound signal. There are many inexpensive external webcams now on the market that are designed to feed directly into your computer. And both Canon and Sony have recently developed software that can allow certain of their DSLR and mirrorless models to easily connect to a computer and be recognized as a webcam. When you're working solo, they have the additional advantage of autofocus, and many also feature a flip-up screen so you can monitor your framing as you go. Besides putting your hands on the best camera you can, one general piece of advice I can offer is not to stream live if you don't have to. You can step back in a more relaxed fashion, do a second take as needed, edit out mistakes and awkward pauses, and then deliver a smooth finished product. Why not? Your guests will be more relaxed knowing you've got their backs, and you'll be sure to get a better product in the end. Lighting is another area where I'm lucky to have a lot of gear at my disposal. Although what I chose for our interviews was pretty simple. I placed a BB&S flyer directly over the camera, and if you're not familiar with it, it's sort of like a LED China ball. This kind of a project doesn't call for dramatic lighting, and lots of flat fill light helps soften my craggy weathered features. Plus, placing it right above the camera causes my shadow to be hidden behind my body. What I love about lighting is that there's so many different ways to create an image. And nowadays, there are even kits available specifically designed to light yourself for a web interview. Also from BB&S Lighting, they have what they call their reporter kit. It's two 1x1 remote phosphor pipelines with an integrated stand. And the idea is you put one on each side of your computer, bring it up to the balance that you like, and you're ready to go. Also from a company called Lytra, they have a bunch of different small LED lights. This guy's called the Lytra Pro. You can adjust the intensity, you can do color, all from the iPhone app. This little guy's called the Torch. You can run all day off of an internal battery, and it's completely weather resistant. In fact, submersible down to 60 feet. This model is called the Lytra Studio. It has barn doors and egg crate and lots of other accessories. It's RGB WWW, so it does a lot of different color, and you can do effects. It's a good thing that wasn't in my rearview mirror. This way I can do wireless 3-point lighting while sitting in front of the camera, all controlled by my iPhone. If you don't happen to have such products available, just try to make sure you're adequately and evenly front lit, and not positioned against a brighter background. For example, if you're using daylight coming in from a window, then facing the window rather than having it as the background. Speaking of backgrounds, a relatively simple plain one usually works best. Just make sure it's not too much brighter or darker than your face. I've seen a lot of people set up very high contrast shots, which might look good as a still image, but as soon as they move the auto iris, common in most web cameras, goes nuts, and you get a lot of unwanted exposure fluttering. I would say that you also want to avoid anything distracting in the background. Interviews in front of the bookshelf have become sort of a cliché, and you don't want viewers checking out your reading list instead of listening to what you're saying. It's also a good idea to have a little depth behind you if you can. So don't be right up against a wall if you can help it. If you want to use green screen, try to do it right, with an evenly lit blue or green screen. But beware, you're going to have to come up with a background plate that has the proper perspective, and it's just another step in the post-production process. Now, Zoom has the ability to replace the background without any green screen, but if there's any kind of movement, it tends to break up. And if it's not done right, it can look really cheesy, so my advice is just to keep it simple. For your camera angle, both web camera and secondary recording device, try to keep these at or above your eye level. It's common to see people looking down at their laptops on the desk. Nobody looks their best from a low angle. If you don't have an Apple box, you might try putting a couple books underneath the laptop. If you're double recording, as we have suggested, then try to get the cameras as close to each other as possible. And when you're addressing the audience, look into the better quality camera. That's the recording you'll want to try to use. For framing, I always suggest landscape or horizontal view rather than vertical. Most people are still viewing content horizontally, and if you throw a vertical image in there, it gets majorly cropped or wastes a lot of the viewer's screen with black. If you're shooting at a high enough resolution and frame a little looser, then in case you have a problem and need to make a cut, you can digitally zoom in and avoid a jump cut. Generally, however, a chest shot usually works best. And if you want tighter, be careful not to get too close to a wide-angle lens, unless you're looking for comical distortion. For sound, first try to find a quiet time and place for your recording. Silence your phone and keep any extraneous sound to a minimum. As with web cameras, the built-in microphones on the computer and laptops are not the highest quality or in the best place to record your sound. If you have access to a separate microphone, try to get it as close to your mouth as you can. Lavaliers are handy, but unless you have one designed to go into a computer with a USB connector, you'll need some sort of digital adapter. The good news is that they're not too costly. For our recordings, I used a shotgun mic on a boom pole, so I wouldn't have to worry about rustle or if I happen to tap my chest for any reason. It's best to keep your external speakers muted on a web call to avoid feedback and echo, so try to use headsets. Mobile device headsets work just fine, and actually there's a microphone usually built in that you can use for your web recordings. Wireless earbuds are also a good alternative if you have them. I picked up an inexpensive teleprompter to work with my iPad a couple of years back, and it comes in quite handy for our DCS recordings. In fact, I'm using one right now and controlling it with my iPhone. The hardware and software to run it are only about $150. It attaches to my 15mm support rods and includes a two-way mirror that allows me to look straight down the barrel of the lens. While recording interviews, I replace the iPad with my small HD DP7 monitor, and that allows me to maintain eye contact with the guests throughout the interview. A simple teleprompter makes a nice addition to a small web studio, and it's not too expensive. Try to have wired connectivity for your web presentations, and if you're using Wi-Fi, try to make sure you have a strong signal on it. There are not too many others currently using the network at the same time. Don't be afraid to use a little makeup, especially if you have a face like mine that's better suited to radio. But be careful not to overdo it. Just a light brush to even out your complexion and take care of unwanted shine. Never let them see you sweat. The last piece of advice I would give is to keep your presentations concise. Attention spans are short, and there's a lot of webinar fatigue out there right now. So you need to keep your content interesting and no longer than required to get your points across. That said, it seems like a good time to wrap up this presentation. So thanks for joining me, and best of luck looking your best on the web.